Well, welcome again to the HIMSS Washington Virtual Summit. This is our final session. We've been going on for 2 weeks now. We've had some great discussions, and all the videos of these presentations are going to be available on our website over the next couple of weeks. We also have a YouTube channel, which they are currently residing at. I'm very excited about the topic on remote work, and moderating today is Artina Mitchell, who's been a longtime board member and member of the HIMSS community. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Artina.
Myself. Thank you, Dwayne. And thank you everyone for attending today. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today. With that being said, I'd like to introduce you to Ellen Wiegand, of CIO and VP of Virginia Mason, who will be speaking and presenting today on remote work repercussions post-COVID. If during that time you have questions, you have something that comes to mind, pop it in the chat, because when following this session, we'll have a panel discussion, and I'll make sure to bring that information to the panel. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Ellen, it's all you.
All right, thank you, Artina. I will share my presentation here. Bear with me a minute. Right, so today's topic, thank you for joining, and good afternoon, first of all. Today's topic is about remote work, and really a continuation of the great dialogue that was started last Thursday with a strong focus on the forward-looking view on remote work post-COVID. So at Virginia Mason, we start all of our presentations with our strategic plan, so I thought I'd share that here. Really, in the time of COVID, we've been leveraging our integrated information system strategy and taking really good care of our people in order to take great care of our patients. I think, as most of you all probably experienced, within a matter of days, we moved almost our entire corporate workforce to remote work, including our entire IT department. So over the several days, everyone's work life changed from getting in the car, getting on the bus, coming into the office, seeing some coworkers, getting work done, and going home, to pretty much sitting at home all day, potentially by yourself, and working in this virtual setting. And so, being a lean shop, we have a lean management methodology called Virginia Mason Production System. We've hosted a series of process improvement events to really dive into what does it take to be successful as a remote worker and a remote leader. What kind of tools do we need to provide, what training, et cetera, to make this sustainable? And so these are artifacts you see from those Kaizen events. And where we've landed, more or less, is that we think the future of remote work looks a little bit like this, with still a lot of time spent working from home, but the opportunity to also come into the office when it makes sense for small group meetings, for things like brainstorming and generating ideas. Maybe you need to come into the office because your home environment isn't conducive to work on any particular day, but by and large, working from home. And so the things that we identified really quickly that we needed to put in place and have been working on, really since that late February, early March timeframe, are supporting our people. So providing some guidance and training for our remote workers on how they can both be effective and productive, but also maintain a good work-life balance when they're working from home. And similarly for our leaders, what does it take to both lead remote teams and do it remotely, be a remote leader? So a lot of work has gone into being able to communicate effectively, continue to allow people to feel like a team, even though they're in all varied locations. And I think most importantly, the thing that we've put a lot of emphasis on is our employee well-being. So really leaning into the Wellbeing Wednesday, providing well-being resources. Certainly we have the employee assistance programs, but in addition to that, just some more casual things, recommendations for how people can maintain some, their own mental health during these really challenging times. And then processes, like I said, we've used our process improvement workshops to really dig into almost every process we had, particularly within IT, and thinking outside the box and how we can make those processes work in a virtual setting. Things like daily huddles, rounding with your team, providing service to customers, training, system monitoring, and then our own internal process improvements. We, within the first couple of weeks, we actually moved our entire help desk, our training team, and our network operations center to remote work. So it became really important for us to be able to maintain service levels, obviously, without being on site. So really redoing that standard work was very important. And then, of course, as we're all really focused on the technology pieces, being able to actually physically get the work done takes the right equipment and the right tools. And what we found in the early days where some of those tools are really hard to come by. So, we wanted everybody to have webcams and headsets if they didn't have an integrated camera. And it was really hard to get that equipment. And the equipment we could get, we tried real hard to dedicate to providers doing patient care visits. We certainly bumped up against some capacity concerns, not particularly on the VM network. We were pleasantly surprised with the ability to handle the load, particularly with increased video traffic. But with employee and team member home internet, certainly there were concerns there. And we very quickly, like many others have said, moved to Microsoft Teams as a standard communication tool and a way to maintain some teamwork in the virtual setting. That worked really well. And so as we've gotten through this, I wanted to share a little bit about what our team members are saying about working from home. They're certainly saying that they feel safer at home, which was really the point, to keep them safe and being able to support our patients. But they really miss in-person contact with their teammates. Even if they are able to see them on video, it's just not the same. They are more productive. We've certainly seen an increase in productivity, but we kind of keep an eye on that because it also feels a little bit like they're working more hours. And there's certainly data out there to support the theory that as folks have transitioned to remote work in the time of COVID, our workday has certainly expanded. Our team members are really enjoying the ability to balance work and personal commitments a little bit better with some flexible scheduling, working from home or from alternative locations. But this is still really hard, particularly for folks with kids, school-age kids at home. Reduced commutes was a big win. The commute is so really burdensome. Team members, our offices are located in downtown Seattle, and we have team members who commute, upwards of an hour and a half, 2 hours each way. So they really saw a big time savings there, although that I think is connected to the next bullet down, which we've also found it's easy for team members to work too much. So we have to be really deliberate about taking breaks, setting work hours, and being deliberate about separating work from home. It is super easy to just be on your work laptop all day because it's right there, potentially in your dining room. So this has been top of mind for our leadership, is how do we help our team members set those boundaries. And then finally, we had some really interesting feedback on our virtual meeting formats. We thought they would not be as well received as in-person meetings because we had been very heavily focused on in-person meetings prior to COVID, but actually the feedback from our team members where they felt like it was a more personal experience being in a virtual meeting with everyone cameras on. And being able to communicate in different formats. We had really good participation with in-meeting chats and polling options and the like. So in terms of future, we are moving to a primary work from home model. We, prior to COVID, had full-time remote workers out of state. That helped us with recruiting for some particularly specialized skill sets. And we allowed folks living locally to work up to 2 days per week. So we had some experience with this, but now going forward, we're essentially saying everyone can continue to work from home full time. We have created some on-site hoteling space. So we happen to benefit from the fact that we never had the funding to move to the open plan office. So we never really modernized our offices to this open concept. We never had the funding to do it. Although now we're really thankful that we had essentially an entire floor of office space that's all private offices that people now feel very safe and comfortable to come in and use as hoteling space. And that is allowing us then to, of course, reduce our real estate footprint in downtown, which is good cost savings. And of course, there's exceptions. We have folks, as I'm sure you all do, who need to come in and be hands-on with equipment, our end user computing team and clinical engineering teams, and they're continuing to be on site. We also have team members who are just not able to work from home full time for whatever reason, whether they lack the connectivity, space in their house, a safe home environment. There's just folks who cannot work from home full time. And so they will continue to come into the office, and we will fully support that. And so these next few slides are really intended to be maybe a little thought-provoking and some topics that we can dive into in the discussion, which I think will be pretty interesting, and topics we're trying to think about and proactively address as we move into a more full-time working from home model. And the first is disparities in remote work. And so, as I mentioned, not everybody has a safe home environment where they can work from home. And there is a comfort in coming into the office. When we were all in the office, it created a much more level playing field, right? We all had similar space, we all had similar tools, we ran into each other in the kitchen, we used the same restrooms. And so differences in our home lives were not that as noticeable, but we're now getting a glimpse into everybody's home life. And some people have really great, home office spaces, and it's calm and quiet, and some don't. And we have to be supportive of all employees. And then not all jobs can be done remotely. Certainly, a lot of our IT jobs can, knowledge worker jobs can, but there's certainly jobs that cannot be done. And I think there's a lot of data out there, if you even just Google it, that supports the notion that working from home works really well for people who are higher wage earners, who have more education, and are white. Quite frankly, people of color are less likely to be in jobs that can be done remotely, or to have reliable internet connection and an environment to do so. So I think there's a little bit of magnification of disparities that could happen if we don't kind of manage this remote work environment well. But although certainly on the other hand, we've seen where recruiting and hiring people virtually has actually expanded our applicant pool and allowed us to hire a more diverse workforce, which has been a long time goal. A good example of that is we're in the middle of a residency recruiting cycle. And in the past, prospective residents would have to fly themselves out to Seattle to be interviewed, and part of that whole process. And by removing that barrier, we've really expanded the applicant pool. So I think there's also some benefits to be gained in being able to build that diverse workforce from multiple locations. And then I know we've talked about this a little bit last Thursday, but just the mental health concerns of working from home on the long term. There's a lot of data and articles and whatnot out there right now about this as well, around isolation and burnout. So we're trying to put some things in place to be a little more proactive on these topics, using technology to keep people connected, over communicating. I'll ask all of our leaders to check in with their team members a lot more frequently. I myself, when we opened our COVID command center on February 28th, we started doing some weekly, at minimum, email communications, really just to celebrate the accomplishments of the week, pass along any important information, hopefully let people know that they're still part of this larger team working towards this larger initiative, and that we are making progress and that their efforts are valued. We think that makes a really big difference. Again, opening office space for hoteling, there comes a point when some folks just need to come in and relieve a little bit of stress that way. And so we want to make sure that we are facilitating that. And then getting creative with team events. We've done all kinds of things, Zoom happy hours, and different virtual events for teams to keep everybody connected. Burnout is a really big one. I think particularly for our healthcare IT teams, the workloads have been really high. It's been all hands on deck. We're kind of in crisis mode, the adrenaline's going, but this is probably not the level of work that's sustainable. And so we have to get back to a point where we have manageable workloads, we can maintain a good work-life balance and really separate out that work time from home time, even when you're working from home. And then figure out ways to help people disconnect. So we have put together some different wellness initiatives. We have a leave work at work checklist. So kind of at the end of the day, sum up your day and kind of leave it in your home office and go on with your personal business at the end of the day. And then some flexible schedules we found are really helping, particularly as the days are getting shorter. Folks might like to go outside for a walk or a run in the middle of the day when the sun's out and come back to work in the evening when it gets a little darker. And then thinking a little bit more broadly, thinking about the community impact of all of us working from home, particularly downtown Seattle. Right now, downtown is pretty quiet. There's a lot of empty office space. And will that continue? Will that office space fill back up or not? And what does that mean for supporting businesses? The local delis and dry cleaners and shops and all of that served those people who were working downtown who are now not working there. What will happen with those businesses and how will we kind of reinvent that downtown economy? And thinking about if you can work remotely from anywhere, where would you work? I know I live just north of downtown Seattle in Fremont, and just the general conversation with the neighbors is maybe we'll move to Boise or Bend because a lot of tech workers, they can work from wherever. So what is that going to mean for our local communities as people decide where and how they want to live in a potentially longer term work from home situation? And then I'm sure the panel and you all have other impacts and whatnot that you come up with. So with that, I think I'll turn it back to Artina for our panel discussion.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ellen. And I don't see that there are, Dwayne, I think, thank you. Thank you, Ellen. That was a great presentation. Thank you for sharing your experience and giving us some things to think about in some discussion topics for our panelists. Now here I am. I'm going to introduce the panelists for the next portion of our event. We have with us today John Norenberg, who's the System VP of Technology and Applications from PeaceHealth. We have Scott Waters, CIO and Technology Officer of Overlake Hospital Medical Center. And we have Miriam Golami, hopefully I pronounced that right. I apologize if I don't, GVP and Chief Production Officer of Providence Digital Innovation Group. And to kind of bring that back in, Ellen brought up, it looks like we've got a question. I guess there's a question for you. I think this is for you, Ellen. Question was, how did you do Kaizen events remotely?
Oh, that's a great question. If any of you, probably many of you have participated in Kaizen events, they're very tactile. There's a lot of sticky notes and whiteboards and whatnot. And replacing that in electronic format was a little challenging, quite challenging. I mentioned we had a series of Kaizen events on how we would support remote workers. We actually did those Kaizen events remotely. And we used Teams, and it actually worked really well. We used Teams for the getting people together. We used Miro whiteboards to kind of simulate some of that whiteboarding and sticky note process. The polling, folks actually really enjoyed that. And one of the unexpected benefits of that were that team members who maybe would not have ordinarily been able to physically participate in the Kaizen event, so they would have been kind of I'll say disqualified, but they would not have been able to be there physically, couldn't participate. But in the remote world, they could, or we could have folks drop in and be advisors for certain sections a lot more easily than we could in the physical setting. So we've done a lot of creative adaptations and using electronic tools. It's still definitely a work in progress. We're actually planning a Kaizen event here over the next month or so to work on the virtual Kaizen, the Kaizen event on how to have a Kaizen event so that it's like next level Kaizen, which should be really interesting. But the tools are there certainly within Teams and some of the integrated components within Teams.
Thank you, Ellen. We have another question, Ellen, for you. If VM is considering IT staff can work from anywhere, Bend, Boise, are you also considering salary changes since the cost of living may be different than downtown Seattle?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, we don't adjust salaries based on location, and we do that for kind of some internal equity issue concerns. We want to maintain internal equity. That I would say that is not necessarily out of the question. Historically we're inching up to 10% or so of our IT workforce working from out of state. I think as the proportion grows, our thinking might change a little bit about that. But as of right now, we're not adjusting salaries.
Thank you, Ellen. That's an interesting question. And Ellen, thank you for your perspective. I'm curious what the other panelists, what your thoughts are on that particular question. Maybe we can start with John.
So PeaceHealth doesn't have a position there. So all I have right now is just my opinion. And my opinion is that we're probably way too early in this process. We went home as a result of a pandemic while most of us were considering, working from home options in at least some way, shape, or form. And I just don't think that, I think there are other fish to fry to get done before we start talking about potential, salary issues with people who want to live, far away from the high cost areas that we're in now. So I just, that's something I haven't thought about, and I hopefully I don't have to, because I think we've got a whole list of things that are lined up and ahead of it that really need to get done rather quickly.
Thank you. John, for your thoughts. I kind of agree with some of them, of course. I'm curious, Scott, what your thoughts are on the salary question.
Yeah, I think the salary question is it's a question we're all going to have to answer at some point. But I kind of agree with John. We don't have, so again, similar to John's statement, Overlake doesn't have a position on this yet. So just my take on it. I think that, we don't have a huge amount of out-of-state remote workers, and I don't see it moving towards that anytime in the near future, but we do have some asks. So when I was listening to Ellen's presentation, I think you mentioned Idaho or something, Ellen, and we actually have several employees that are looking at Idaho and relocating for, the cost savings and bigger houses and better workspaces and all those kinds of things. So we'll have to tackle it at some point. But like I said, I agree with John. We're focusing on some other more high priority things right now, and the adjustment of salaries, we'll tackle that further down the line.
Thank you, Scott. Now, I know there was a question about Kaizen events and earlier, and Ellen shared a little bit about how that works for her and her teams. Do you, John or Scott, are in agreement, or are you guys doing that a little bit differently? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
We are just now standing up the project to bring mural whiteboarding system into our environment. Other than that, I haven't seen a lot of notifications on specific Kaizen events. We were very focused on COVID, and then we switched focus to a couple other strategic things, and now we're switching back. And right now our workload is at a peak as a result of, we've got these strategic realignment initiatives going on, along with the COVID surge work going on. And so I get notified of the Kaizen events. I haven't seen or haven't paid enough attention to have seen any one of them launching. So I assume that if they're going on, site-based or something like that, that they're making do. But we will have murals stood up here, hopefully in the next, 6 to 8 weeks. In which case we'll have a tool that works well with teams to go ahead and do that kind of work with.
Thank you, John. So, Scott, how about you over there at Overlake?
I mean, nothing specific to, we have our process improvement team working through Microsoft Teams, and it has worked out pretty well, actually. I think people are surprised how, if I kind of make it a bigger statement about just interactive, larger meetings that we typically would do in a room and have a lot of sticky notes and interaction and things like that. I think of the annual enterprise project and resource planning efforts and things like that I was really kind of racking my brain initially at the beginning of the COVID crisis, because that hit us during our planning cycle. And, how do we do this? I was surprised with how well it went. And that was at the very beginning. Microsoft Teams actually gives us a pretty good platform to get a lot of things done and be probably a little more organized and efficient than we are when we're sitting in a room. That was a lot of the feedback. We were able to get our normal annual resource planning and prioritization work done in about half the time. Usually it's an all-day retreat, and we did it in about 4.5 hours. So there's some efficiencies that are gained, but I think there's definitely something lost in the virtual environment that you just don't get. That's the same as like sitting in a room across from somebody. Specifically when it's something, you're kind of doing some horse trading and a little contentious bargaining over who gets what for the year. That's probably better done in a room together. But we're getting along with it just fine. Teams has been game changing for Overlake, just like it has been for, I think, everybody on the call. It's really helped our organization realize that, we're geographically separated, and maybe we don't need to bring everybody in for all these large meetings, even if, post COVID. It's probably not the most efficient way to do business. And so there's some good that's come of it from there, that angle.
Thank you for your feedback. I do have a question. Maybe we can start with Ellen. Have you found some good tools for training for the remote worker or even the remote leader that you're using? We've mentioned Teams, but maybe Teams is a good tool.
Teams, that will be my standard answer to every question you ask. Our organizational development team has put together some really good kind of packaged information for remote workers and remote leaders. We haven't, on last Thursday, I was really intrigued last Thursday's call, and Rob was talking about some more formal training certification programs through like WSU and whatnot. We need to explore that, but they've essentially pulled materials from existing sources, to put together kind of like they call it an FAQ, but it's just a nice little packet that people can pull up on our intranet that might give you some resources for how to manage your time remotely, or set your schedule remotely, managing your calendar, doing your day-to-day activities. We've also put out some new leader standard work about virtual huddles and production boards. Pre-COVID at VM, you were likely to see a lot of whiteboards with production boards on them, and the teams would huddle around that whiteboard. We've moved those into Teams and had to restructure, agendas a little bit for those huddles. But I think, to one of Scott's earlier points, some of that work has actually been better served in the virtual setting. People can update their own production boards, or we can even update them automatically with some of our BI tools and reporting and whatnot. So you're doing like less administrative work and more kind of check in on barriers and resolving issues and whatnot in that huddle, even if it's in a virtual setting. So some of that has really been, some good silver linings of moving into the virtual setting, kind of disrupting the way we've historically managed.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. What about, John, what about you and your teams at PeaceHealth? Any tools that you've come across for training or anything that from a shareable standpoint outside of teams that are that you'd like to share with the group?
That's a funny question because I was a staunch non-virtual worker person for a long time, pretty much my whole career. And then I began watching my grown daughters work, and all of them, at least one of them is full-time virtual prior to COVID, and the other two were at least part of the time and long stretches of full-time. And I began to watch how they worked, and I realized that they were as productive as they would have been in an office, and maybe even more so. The work was different, and the way they handled it was different, but it was, and it was very, very personal on how they attacked it. So when we went virtual, that was my thought was that everybody kind of has to figure out their own style for working. One of my daughters goes to Orange Theory at 10 o'clock every day. Another one goes to Orange Theory at 7 p.m. every day, right? And dictating a style to them wouldn't have worked. And so I have not really kept abreast of or paid any interest to any sort of tools like that. I have helped people who wanted help developing their style as I developed my own, but by and large, I think everybody kind of found it. We have unprecedented productivity gains after going virtual, and I actually, one question I do have is around wellness, because everybody being different, you've got to figure out, if somebody is beginning to get burned out, you've got to recognize it, call it to their attention, and then, and I hate to say it this way, but give them permission to stop working, right? And I really hate to say that because I don't know that it's my permission to give for them in an emotional state, but sometimes just saying, hey, look, you don't have to work right now. In fact, I'd rather you didn't work. Go to dinner, get some sleep, go exercise, go do something else right now because, you seem to be burning out, and that's no good for anybody. So it's a very different kind of tool set, and I don't know that I would have tools to train us on that. So that's my story. I'm probably an oddball in this conversation in that way.
No, let's find out. I don't know that you are, but let's see. I'm curious, Scott. I agree, the burnout, and how do you address that? I'm curious if you can maybe tie those questions together, like if you found any tools, and how do you personally, how do you recognize burnout, right, in your teams, or are you able to?
Yeah, I think that's hard, right? John, so I don't think you're an oddball. I actually took the same kind of a very similar approach. But I'm too interested in what Robert brought up in last week's session, these organized, fully thought out curriculum-based, remote worker training programs. And Ellen, I think Seattle U is putting one together. I think I saw something come across the line last week or something. Interesting to look at. But I followed the same approach that you did, John. I actually had quite a few focus group meetings in the early days of the remote work kind of push. And it had a lot to do with giving people the permission, right, to choose their, build their own story and build their own adventure in their remote work day, given some basic guidelines. Productivity needs to stay the same. We need to be here to enable patient care and support our caregivers. But beyond that, and knowing that we hire smart people and we shouldn't be telling them what to do, we should let them do the work that they know how to do. I basically said, hey, let's keep the productivity as high as possible. Let's check in often. Let's share things that are working and things that aren't working, and let's be adults and manage ourselves. And I mean, very surprised at how high the productivity has been, how good people have been about, not only doing what they're supposed to, but doing quite a bit more. And some of that is, I guess it's like a relief that some people feel during their day. They get up at, whatever time, they throw laundry in the washing machine, then they start their work. They do a two hours worth of meetings. They take a 10-minute break. They throw it in the dryer, then they jump right back on and they work. And then they go to Orange Theory or whatever that break looks like for a little bit of wellness. And they're back at it. And by the end of their work day, they've gotten all their work that they needed to get done and more from a productivity perspective. And they're actually feeling good going into their evening with their family, because maybe some of these little things that were kind of nagging are also getting done at the same time. So they're getting really efficient, and they're getting a lot of benefits out of working from home above and beyond like this feeling of safety and all that stuff that goes along with that. So yeah, punchline, I don't think you're an oddball in the group, John. I think we're all kind of handling it the same way.
The one thing I coach is turn your computer off. And I don't mean log out, I mean turn it off, because the sucker will ding all night. And if you haven't turned it off, there's this constant reminder, constant nag, and that's a very personal decision on what to do. The other thing is this rings up a fight I've been having with the Western world for the last 20 years, which is we've been moving towards attempting to treat everybody exactly the same. And I rebel against that, because everybody's on a different path and everybody's different. There's some things you have to treat them the same over, but there's a lot of times that for someone's work ability and their productivity depends on them being able to be just a little bit different. And so I think everybody finding their own path through this, especially because we're seeing the productivity so high. And I'm actually coaching the other direction, which is you got to stop working, otherwise we'll lose you. I really want everybody to find it, and as Scott said, write their own story here.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because that was kind of leads us into one of the topics that Ellen had shared with us, is the disparities in remote work. Like what you were talking about is everyone is their own, they have their own scenario, their own, the way they live in their homes and how they live and their families. And it's true that not, of course, not all jobs can be done remotely, but the jobs that can be done, maybe they just don't have the situation or the wherewithal or the tools or the space to do that. And I'd be really curious to hear from each of you how, what tools you're using, how you're addressing those types of disparities, or if you have, or what your plans are. Maybe we start off with Ellen, if you can share a little bit about your thoughts on those. More thoughts.
More thoughts. Yeah, I think there are things that we as employers can help with, and things that we maybe can't. So we have to figure out how to help folks help themselves or figure out workarounds. So, as it relates to equipment and internet connectivity and whatnot, we can help with that. We provide kind of a little kit, a go home kit for people who are working from home, their device and the peripherals, some support to get their own home network set up, some reimbursement for, internet connectivity. So we can help there. We haven't quite at VM anyway landed on how to help with some of the kind of ergonomics, the furniture and the desk and that stuff. We're still sort of contemplating that, whether we provide a stipend or buy some furniture. People can take their existing furniture home. We're not quite sure how we're going to handle that, but our intention is to help there. In terms of space, the things that I find, think that are harder for us to help with are, the actual physical space. If you're living in a small apartment with your family, it becomes almost impossible to get a quiet space to work, and be on a meeting and be able to concentrate and all of that, which is where we see, some of that hoteling space and the office space being really valuable. So some of the things we're thinking about in terms of addressing that are obviously a hoteling space in our existing office location, which is downtown, but also potentially setting up some hoteling spaces in regional medical centers. So VM operates medical centers, north, south, east, and west of the Puget Sound. And maybe we could open up some office space there that's closer to the person's home, than having to make a really long commute into our downtown offices, because it would be just as easy for them to work from our Federal Way Regional Medical Center as it is from our Seattle Administrative Center. So some of that in order to kind of offload the burden. I mean, certainly, we can't build people a new house, or we can provide employee assistance, if they're not in a safe space. I think one of the most important things we can do for our employees is just to check in a lot and make sure they are okay at home as much as we can. I think we have a window into their personal life through which, we don't want to overstep, but we still, want to look out for that person. We care about their well-being, both just for themselves and for us. So those are things I think that we can do and we're trying to address.
Thank you. John, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's two things that I find impossible to solve, and one is we call all of our associates caregivers. So we have two caregivers, two actual members of my leadership team who live in such remote places that they can't get proper high-speed internet. For those individuals, they drive into the office every day, and we make certain that we're accommodating them on that. That's something easy to solve. Coming out here from Chicagoland, I couldn't imagine anybody living too far away for broadband, but I guess it's capable out here. The second thing is the child care issue, and it's one I'm very sensitive to. The homeschooling, etc., is an incredible stressor on my teammates. Everyone who's attempting to, the juggling act of attempting to play teacher's aide, keep their kids focused, and do the job that they expect of themselves. It's interesting because their expectations of themselves are 100% across the board higher than my expectations for them, which is why I love them. But at the same time, it's driving them a little crazy. And so I don't know how we crack that nut, but that's one, the family care issues, when family care encroaches into the workday like schooling does, that's a tough one. And I'm, without the schools opening again, I don't know how we solve for it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think COVID has really caused us to question and open our minds to is how much of the work really needs to get done between 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the evening, Monday through Friday. And certainly it doesn't solve the whole issue to be able to work a flexible schedule, because you can't work 24 hours a day, right? You can't spend 8 hours with the kids and 8 hours then at your job, but it helps some. And we found, if to your earlier point, John, our team members are really good at figuring out that a balance. If we open the door for them to say, we don't really care what time of day your work gets done. There's a particular meeting here or there that needs to be attended to during those Monday through Friday hours. But other than that, the work can get done at any point. Balance it with what makes sense for your schedule. block your work calendar when your kid has a school thing that you have to do, so that we can kind of work around it. And that's actually been working fairly well for the team. I mean, I think, long-term sustainability, like I say, I don't know about that. I think the, jury's out. But for this kind of crisis mode, it's been helpful.
Yeah, we've done the same thing, Ellen, as far as, and that's kind of where I was going is earlier is if they need to take care of something, they just need to block their calendar out. Majority of our staff are salaried, and it's not an issue, right? It's basically production type of work. So get the work done and fit it in where you think works best based on home care and all these other things that are going on. I actually had a question, Ellen, when I was listening to you give your presentation, specific around like the hoteling question, because I'm just trying to figure this part out. How are you looking at making things fair? Because I think you're tackling the same strategy that all of us are, with a long-term goal of reducing real estate costs and things like that. And part of figuring out, what size space you need for, X number of people is figuring out how many people are going to work from home 100% or 90% or whatever, and then how many folks just feel like they want to be on site. And how do you make it, have you started thinking about how you make it fair? Because a lot of people want to come back now. And part of the strategy I'm looking at for cost reductions rely on the fact that a majority of them are going to be, 90% remote or 80% remote. So have you come up with some criteria to vet the people that want to come back versus the people that have to because they don't have a safe work environment or can do, a nice work environment at home?
Yeah, I would say we don't have any hard and fast rules to that. I mentioned we did have a Kaizen event on the remote workers, and the team kind of thought through a little bit of a matrix of, who needs named office space, which almost no one needs named office space, who needs a space to come in every day. And mostly it was, our end user computing team and, a handful of others, who might need some lock space. I think we're right now erring on the side of maybe having more space than we might need. We have hoteling space on one floor for about 30% of our team members, which to date, based on just feedback from the team, is more team members who then want to come in. So we've been able to set it up more in hoteling, first come, first serve, and it really hasn't been a problem. I think if we get a year from now, we probably, we'll have more people wanting to come in and need to be more deliberate about creating some kind of schedule or rules around who gets what space.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through that myself as far as long-term financial planning and, do we need 20%? Is it a 20% ratio? Is it a 30% ratio? Like you said, thanks for that.
Yeah. And so there's others, the flip side of it is some of it is, if the expectation is everyone's at home and some people are hoteling, and then some people have more of a permanent space in the office, there becomes a little bit of a question, like, why does that person need a space? And,
right.
There's some of those conversations that become a little less comfortable. So it's like, well, just everybody can hotel, book your spot, and, no explanations kind of theory, I guess.
Yeah. Cool.
Do you have any comments or thoughts on that topic, John?
We are not ready to start hoteling yet, although that is getting bantered about. We just went through and remodeled our corporate building and densified it, meaning we rammed everybody into these much smaller cubes with lower walls, et cetera, et cetera. We realized that is, in a post-COVID world, that's not going to work. And so right now they are, they're going to redo the building with reduced occupancy. I think half occupancy was the last thing we heard. With the IT being one of the bigger teams in the corporate world, my assumption was always that they were assuming that because our productivity is so high that we won't be coming back en masse, that we'll have hoteling spaces and meeting spaces, but we won't be coming back. And there really hasn't been a lot of discussion since then. I mean, they just now got the IT team back in to the office to clean out their cubicles so that they could begin the deconstruction of the area. Because when we picked up, like everybody else, we picked up and just left.
Yeah.
We assumed we'd be back in a week or two, and we haven't. So we just got all of our personal stuff last month.
Well, there was somewhat of a question. It was a question that said, was basically, so a lot of you guys are looking at making some plans, you're figuring out what that might look like. Has there been any consideration in using any type of third-party spaces, like WeWork or something like that? Is that a consideration in your planning?
I can say,
go
ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead, Scott.
I can say it's not for us. I think we have a lot more space that's suddenly open and available, for at least for the time being, that we wouldn't really want to invest in that right now. Maybe long term, we'll see. But we're looking at kind of the opposite, which is spinning down some of these real estate commitments.
Yeah, we were looking at it more before COVID because we were trying to figure out how we might flexibly expand and then contract some space, based on project requirements and whatnot. If we need to we had a big project in flight, we were trying to bring a whole bunch of people in, might we use WeWorks or something like that to temporarily expand our space, but that's certainly no longer a need.
And at this point, I can't imagine that we'd be looking for more space. I don't have visibility into our real estate plans at the moment, but I can't imagine it.
I will say the one idea that some of our staff members have brought up, because we do have folks who are working, out of the area, out of state, is, if perhaps we had some agreements with like a flexible workspace in the locations where those people lived, that it would be, an interesting kind of backup for them. If their home environment, something happened and they just couldn't work from home for a week, could they go sit at a WeWorks for a week, or, that type of thinking, which I think is really intriguing. If you get more of your staff members in different locations, and perhaps there's a national company you could figure something out with, but it's not at all, not something we need at this point.
Yeah. Well, the comment was, that was the idea. No. We have about 4 minutes left, and I know that I'm not sure, do we have enough time for some more thoughts? I was curious, Ellen, you had posed in your presentation, mentioned something about community impact. And what is that like? Look, what are your thoughts on how everything that's happening, how is that going to impact our immediate and surrounding community, like population centers, like we were talking about downtown? I'm really curious what everyone's thoughts are on that particular topic. If maybe we can just share just a few things that come to mind before we wrap up. And maybe if we start with John.
When I think about community impact, I think in large part about the support services like restaurants. The restaurant industry, I think post-COVID is going to be going through a makeover that they had started, but it's going to happen there. And with more people eating at home, I'm finding there to be weird shortages in the grocery stores. I've never in my life not been able to buy an orange, and there haven't been oranges at Fred Meyer's here near me for almost 3 weeks. Those kinds of things that you just, since people are eating more at home, the produce is if you go grocery shopping around me after 7 o'clock at night, there's no worthy produce left, and they're still open for another 3 hours. So, you need to be in by 10 in the morning in order to get the good produce. Those kinds of things that this whole thing is beginning to shift the business climate around some of the services we've taken for granted for a long time.
I agree. What about you, Scott? What are your thoughts on that? I agree with you, John. I'm experiencing the same thing. I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm experiencing the same thing as well, John. I too kind of keyed in on that topic on Ellen's presentation, and it got me thinking. And obviously, it's kind of it's a scary time for small business owners, especially in downtown business cores. You know, we're right here in downtown Bellevue, and it looks very different than it did a year ago. My heart goes out to all these small business owners, coffee shops, restaurant owners. I don't know. I think it will come back. I think it will come back. These are very desirable locations to be. People like to be kind of involved in the hustle and bustle of a downtown core, but it's going to take a while. And, you know, there's trickle up and down effects of that type of, you know, impact to the local kind of ecosystem that we haven't even begun to like think about, which will impact the hospital, right? Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
One thing for certain, it's going to be different when the dust settles.
Yeah, you bet.
I know, Ellen, I mean, you brought it up. Did you have any additional thoughts you'd like to share around that?
I think, yeah, just to echo what folks said and what was in the slide. I think it'll just be interesting to see the end result of people moving or not. You know, there's a lot of kind of talk about that. There's certain cities and states promoting, you know, moving there for a different quality of life and other reasons. A lot of people talking about it. It'd be interesting to see what actually happens. You know, that type of movement could have, you know, some implications. It'll be, I think, interesting to see over the next couple of years if some of that comes to fruition, or you know, we get a vaccine and we all go back to doing something similar to what we had been doing before.
Yeah. I mean, I would talk with my family, and we're talking about making some changes and moving around potentially. So I'm curious as well to see how things transpire.
I mean, certainly it's become, yeah, I live obviously here in Seattle. My whole family lives on the East Coast. And, you know, historically it's not a problem, right? You just get on a plane and you see him I haven't seen him almost a year. And so you just start thinking differently about where you want to live and why you want to live there. And yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
One thing I will tell you is don't forget about the time change, because I'm getting ready to go and spend an extended period at my home in Illinois. Finally get to see my wife again after 6 months. Last time I did it, it was really cool to not have meetings start till 10 in the morning. But boy, those 5 o'clock in the evening meetings, taking them at 7, it just wasn't that much fun. So you know, there's a plus and a minus to everything. And, you know, we're about to go find out some, you know, how much fun things really are that seem like they'd be fun on the surface.
Yep.
Right.
True.
Well, I think we're at time. Dwayne, am I right? I think we're at time. And we could continue to go on and on. So hopefully we'll have a continuation of this conversation in our another HIMSS event. But for now, I want to say thank you for you guys, for John and Ellen and Scott for participating. It's been a great conversation, and please, I don't know, be safe, be healthy, right? Like love life, and to continue on and move forward. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Artina.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. Artina, thanks very much for moderating. You did a great job, and our panelists. We hope you'll continue to check out the HIMSS Washington website. We're going to continue to have these virtual type meetings going on throughout the next year. And we very much appreciate the HIMSS community and all the work that our healthcare workers do throughout this state and throughout the country. We wouldn't be here without you guys. And so we appreciate that and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.